much. So I'm Alexis Culp. I'm a channel systems engineer with FireEye, or consulting systems engineer this year. So we're going to talk about the 3 pillars that you need in an organization. I did talk about this one slide last year, so I'm sorry if it's repetitive, but it's still true. You need technology. Now, FireEye has some interesting technology. We've got our own hypervisor that we built around security. So unlike the hypervisor that VMware has or Microsoft, this is designed for security. So masking the fact that it's in a VM, making sure logs are incremented, things of that nature. That technology helps us detect unknown threats. It also helps us block known threats. We also have great packet capture technology, a whole slew of technology and tools for SOC augmentation, for incident response. You can buy all the technology on the block. You can have every piece of gear ever created. But if it's not populated with useful, actionable intelligence, it's shelfware. We've got a lot of intelligence at FireEye. We get it from 3 different places. One is from the technology. It self-learns, right? It learns about unknown threats. It shares that intelligence with all of our other gear. Shares that intelligence in the form of intel papers and whatnot. We also have adversary intelligence. So going out and searching forums and chat rooms and seeing what kind of exploits are for sale, what kind of data is for sale, to get a finger on the pulse of where the threat actors are moving today. Where's their most lucrative thing today? Third piece you need, you can have all the technology out there, you can populate it with all the useful intelligence ever created, but if you do not know how to use it, it's again shelfware. So you need experts. And we have experts around the globe at FireEye doing incident response. We do about 100,000 hours of incident response on a yearly basis. In any given moment, we're in about 300 different organizations dealing with incident response. And I'm going to go over some statistics from last year's incident response. So if we take a look, we've been doing IR for 11 years in the Mandiant side of FireEye. We take a look at how long an average threat actor stays resident and undetected in a network. You can see that there's been some success. We have seen improvement across organizations with their cybersecurity posture. Really good improvement. But who here thinks 146 days is still okay for somebody to be in a network and to own that network? Any hands? Right, that's still too long, right? I've taken everything in the kitchen sink. I know your processes, procedures. I know where your databases are. I've taken those databases. I've taken credentials. Most likely I've set up a VPN account and I have domain admin privileges and I don't even need malware to infect the network at that point or to take data out of the network. So last year in 2015, we noticed a few trends that I want to highlight. First of all, we've seen an increase in business disruption attacks. So these would be not the stealthy, slow, and low attacks that we're used to, but more noisy. An example would be a nation state not wanting somebody to release a movie and being very public about that. Another example would be maybe taking a machine and holding it for ransom. How about an adult website that then sends you an email when their stuff is stolen? Somebody sends you an email and says, I have all the emails that you've ever sent on this adult website and I want to give it to your wife if you don't pay me some bitcoins. So a lot of business disruption, a lot of noisy attacks. We've also seen an increase in lost personal identifiable information, specifically around China. And the third piece is that we've seen attacks on routers and switches, which is something that most incident responders traditionally would have overlooked when doing IR. So what's the motivation behind a disruption attack? Well, there's financial motivation for the ransomware. There's political motivation when it's nation-state sponsored. And then we've also seen some attacks where they're wiping complete database systems and wiping control systems, critical infrastructure systems, completely wiping. There's no financial gain, there's no political gain. And then, of course, your standard leaking of confidential data to your WikiLeaks, to the press, to Pastebin. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the #1 thing on everybody's mind from 2015, and it's still a hot topic this year. If you've ever had the displeasure of seeing one of these screens, then you don't have really good eye on what's happening in the organization. These are the screens that you see when that machine's been completely encrypted and it's too late. ransomware has been common. There's different variants coming out pretty much on a monthly basis. And one thing that's really interesting is the hackers have learned the risk profile that the organization also takes when they make cybersecurity purchases. So when I'm an organization looking to make a purchase for cybersecurity or to enhance my cybersecurity posture, I weigh my risk versus the cost. Hackers are doing the same thing. It was only 17 grand to get a hospital to shell out the money in Los Angeles. It's a pretty low amount of money. So if you do that multiple times, you can get a lot of money just with small attacks like ransomware. How about being held for ransom? You might not even be aware of these kind of breaches. This is where the executive staff or somebody in the organization gets an email notifying them about something. Could be that adult website information I was mentioning earlier. Could be something that they don't want leaked to the press. Emails between the organization talking about public figures. Could be something political in nature. They demand a ransom, and then they give you a deadline, all via email. You don't even know if the attack is real. You have to figure out, is it real? Am I going to pay for this? What's my risk? And then the smart move, if you are thinking about paying that Bitcoin, is to work with your local law enforcement agency to see if you can maybe trace where that payment ends up. Let's talk about the personal identifiable information that we see linked to China. They're not just stealing some records, they're stealing the whole database. I like to think of it like China has a SIM on us. So you know SIMs in your network collect all the logs. You go back in time, you get a lot of information about what's going on in your organization. These guys are collecting all the logs and all the information on you. Mother's maiden name, previous addresses, LinkedIn profiles. If it's public already, they've already stored it and saved it. And if it's private and they've stolen it, they're correlating it. That way, if they have an attack that they'd like to launch later that's targeted, they're already going to be having a ton of reconnaissance information at their fingertips. It's a lot of data that they've stolen last year. Let's talk about attacks on network devices. And I threw at the bottom here, if you want to make a note, you can Google sinful knock. Found this last September. This is that lateral spread nightmare that we always talk about. So you get an infection in the network, you get an alert from some perimeter protection device on that laptop, and next thing you know, you think you've cleaned up that threat, but it still keeps coming back. How is it spreading laterally? Well, these guys went ahead and infected a Cisco iOS router with the Trojan backdoor. Normal incident response procedure would not be to look at a Cisco router and try to compare whether or not a file has been added since the last time an update was made. That's actually not an easy thing to do. How many people installed an endpoint on their Cisco router recently? You can't. How many next generation firewalls are paying attention to the traffic flowing in and out of your Cisco router? They're not. So even the tools and equipment that you've got today really can't help you detect that unless you're on all the endpoints in the organization and you're doing full packet capture across the organization looking for anomalies in the traffic. So, who are you going to call? What's your plan today? When you become breached, when an alert goes off in your organization and you want to handle it, how are you handling it? Do you have an incident response plan in place? Do you have a third party that you know that you can trust and go to respond to incidents as they happen in your organization? FireEye happens to have a $0 incident response retainer. That means that you can sign up for it and never use it. On average, it takes 32 days to get a threat actor out of the network. 32 days. Now, it doesn't take 32 days to do all that work. That's the average. About a week or a week and a half is dotting the I's, crossing the T's, negotiating the price. Why don't you get that done now? Why don't you spend that week now when you're not breached, signing up for incident response or having a plan, a project in place, a partner in place that you can utilize when you're breached? Because when you are breached, the questions coming from the non-technical executive staff at your organization are the following. What exactly was stolen? We heard about the DNC hack. We were told what was stolen, what was not stolen. What happened after that? A hacker said, well, you thought I didn't steal this? Here it is, I'll put it on Pastebin, I did steal it. You need to have the right answer of what was stolen. You need to know what the impact to the business is. What's the risk? How much is it going to cost to take it out of the network, and is that something that I want to do, or do I want to just whack this whole network down. The impact to some of these breaches have been severe. They have taken the network down. Nobody does any work until they can get the threat actor out. Who exactly is at the door? You know, we're always so focused on what piece of malware and how that malware worked. We really need to be focused on who, not what. Who will tell me why? And if I know why, I'm better equipped to protect the assets that are of most importance to me. How did the hacker get into the network? Are they gone? You know, if we talk about the sinful knock example, they were not gone. They were on the router. Have you actually contained the incident? And then how exactly do you recover? So this is something that you want to think about, the worst case scenario. You all have some home that you live in, and you've all thought to yourself, what if a thief comes in my house when I'm not here? We've all had that thought. We make sure we lock the doors. We put pieces of wood by the window so if they're cracked, people can't get in. You've got to do the same thing with the network. You've got to think ahead. You actually want to try to think like the attacker. That's what you're doing at home, right? You're trying to think, if I wanted to rob this house, how would I get in? You've got to put your mind in the mind of the attacker and figure out what's actually important, what assets I should protect. Jump servers ahead of your database. You know, making sure that your data that's important is highly protected, and then still allowing that productivity for your employees. Are there any questions on kind of what we're talking about here? Has everybody got an incident response plan? Who has one? So that's about 5 to 10%. So 90% of you need to think about, what are you going to do when you get the ransomware? Do you have a good backup plan in place? There's a lot of ways to deal with ransomware, right? One is you can just say, wipe the machine and restore it from a decent backup if you've taken a good backup recently. Another one would be to maybe monitor the file modifications. And if you see lots of files being modified, maybe nip it in the bud before it encrypts the drive. There's a lot of different strategies for the attacks that are prevalent today. We do a lot of focus on signature-based technology in our industry, right? We do a lot of desktop AV, making sure that known threats are blocked. Those are not the threats that are in the news. Those are not the threats that you actually should be caring about. It's the things like the ransomware, lateral spread, things of that nature. So I do have 2.5 minutes left of this turbo talk, and I was told I was allowed to ask if there are any questions. So I will open it up to the audience. No questions.
What's your favorite color?
Black. And silver. All right, guys, thank you for letting me present today at ShakaCon. Mahalo.